Welcome to Veritas Group's webinar, Are You Getting Crushed by the Metrics? Today's webinar features Diana Fraser, Senior Client Experience Leader, and Abby Muller, Senior Director of Leadership Giving at the Phoenix Rescue Mission. Welcome, Diana and Abby.
Thanks, Karen. Great to be with you. I have to say, every time I thought of, are you being crushed by the metrics? I thought of being Auntie M, or rather the Wicked Witch with the feet sticking out underneath the house from the Wizard of Oz. Sorry about that, but that's what kept going through my head. And Abby, you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me, Diana, and the Veritas team. So good to be with all of the folks on today's webinar. Like Karen said, my name's Abby Muller. I've been with the Phoenix Rescue Mission about 3.5 years, overseeing the mid-major church corporate plan giving, and recently taking on the stewardship of donors at every level, so below mid-level. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Native Phoenician, have been in faith-based, non-faith-based, higher ed, international relief and development, local human services. So if there's a perspective there that aligns with where you are today or where you've been or would like to be, hopefully what I share with Diana is helpful to you.
Karen, did we lose you? We might be having some technical trouble here. Sorry, gang. We'll get it together.
I thought that Caitlin was forwarding, and you all hang on a second. 1 second. Sorry, you all. So now, before we get started in today's topic, I just wanted to share a bit about who we are at Veritas. Some of you on the call may be pretty familiar with us, but those of you who aren't, we're passionately relationship focused and grounded in a data-driven approach. This dynamic is critical to the system, structure, and strategy that we have found to be successful in mid-major and plan giving programs. And we have a vision to help nonprofits of all sizes create a culture and approach to fundraising that will help you create transformational relationships with your donors. And we accomplish this vision through a focused strategy and approach. Over the years, we've worked with thousands of nonprofits through our consulting work and online academy, and we've analyzed millions of donor records. This has framed our strategy and helped us identify the key pillars to success, including creating buy-in across your organization, a focus on donor and value attrition, improving revenue per donor, increasing net revenue to your programs, and being committed to meaningful relationships with your donors. And we've gotten to work with some pretty phenomenal organizations over the years who have partnered with us to create more transformational relationships with their donors. So we're so excited to have you with us here today.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Obviously, we're talking about metrics, and we've posited this as something we need to deal with as a problem in our sector. So let's start jumping in. If you think about before the pandemic, which 4 years ago now, right, there were a number of challenges that were facing the nonprofit sector that were persistent. And in my entire career, 32 years as a frontline fundraiser, they were there. And there's a sense in which a little bit of that got reduced during the pandemic. Some things changed. You couldn't be out and about. So we started to deal with different ways of looking at things. But that is lifted. For the most part, we're out and about again. And what we're seeing is that many nonprofits are going back to where they were. And that's problematic. So it's impacting staffing, donor relationships, events, and so much more. So while there was a lot of difficulty during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, we did see those positive changes, and we're a little concerned about what we see. So let's go on to some of the red flags that we're actually seeing. Leadership is moving back to traditional activity-based kind of metrics, like how many of this did you do? How many of that did you do? How many of this, without any relationship to actually managing a caseload. Fundraisers are being excluded from the conversations about strategy and fundraising plans. So things are being handed to them versus being a part of the conversation of what works for a particular gift officer or a major gift team caseload. There's that increased pressure, again, to get the money. And you just have to, even how aggressive that sounds, get the money.
Mhm.
And we're back to putting quote unquote new donors, or maybe even prospective donors who have high wealth capacities. They're not even a donor, getting back onto caseloads, not qualifying them, not getting engaged. So that whole metric of shoving as many people as possible onto a caseload, because we think the law of averages will kick in somewhere in there. There's also metrics set by people who don't understand them. We are hearing finance teams setting the metrics for the major gift team, or coming out of marketing communications, those kinds of things. And no disrespect to those people. That's not what I mean, but they might not understand the environment and how to manage a relationship-based caseload for what we're talking about. And then on top of this, fundraiser turnover has gotten even worse than it was before. And some organizations are really struggling to find and hire good candidates because they're leaving the nonprofit sector altogether, because the mounting pressure of these metrics that can't be met is resulting in, I just got to get out of this fundraising industry. Abby, I'd love to hear what you're seeing, because you're frontline with an organization and you were there through the majority of the pandemic.
Yes, I've been in the development, advancement, fundraising world for about 10 years. And so I've seen a lot of different environments, a lot of different job descriptions, gone through interview process, accepted some roles, didn't accept some roles. And I have seen from the past, even to today, what you spoke to, right? Job postings that say, you are going to be required to raise $1 million annually in your first year, or you're required to have 20. I actually looked up in my personal email every job description that I've been sent over the years as part of the interview process before this webinar, because I thought, I wonder what I was asked or what I was given. And it was, 20 substantial face-to-face meetings in a month, number of solicitations and asks. And I even had one where it was achieve an annual revenue goal of $XXX. And it was a new position and they hadn't even included the amount. And, that was very, very early on in my career. And, you kind of just let it go, or you're like, oh, they'll tell me when I get there. And I think those metrics could cause fundraisers to chase the dollars. Which end up being a very transactional approach to how you want to deepen relationships with your donors. And so I would just say to any fundraisers out there who are leading a team, organization, you're a frontline fundraiser, is if you're looking to leave, or even with your current organization, ask, like, what's the foundation? Where are we starting from? Even if there is a dollar amount, maybe it's you're getting a caseload of 600 donors who are active mid-level donors, and you're expected to raise $1 million, and the caseload gave 800,000 last year. That helps you to at least see some of the context. But yeah, it's Wild West out there a little bit, and some of that old school metrics as well.
Yeah, I'm seeing things pop up in the chat. What you said, Abby, really pushed some buttons. That's my 2024 goal. You just spoke to exactly what I'm dealing with. So
yeah.
What's happening with metrics? And we'll talk, we'll keep talking about what we're seeing and coming back around to some topics repeatedly, because they really do matter. We've heard some pretty outrageous stories. If you are in LinkedIn and you follow Jeff Schreifels at all, you might have seen from last week, he did a post kind of leading into this webinar today. And one person called out in that reply section about, he had a supervisor who is using Google to monitor his work, and then wanted to know why he didn't make 75 calls a day like the rest of us did. Like, okay, I don't know even the context of that. So a major gift officer being required to make 75 phone calls in a day, obviously that means they don't actually want you to talk to anybody.
Right.
Right. Like, just make those calls. Right.
Churn
so that's a
through.
crazy metric when you think about it. But what we're hearing, all these things Abby mentioned, I mentioned before, it boils down to a leadership that's concerned about revenue, like that chasing the dollars that we talked about. That's bringing in more activity-oriented metrics. How much of this did you do? How much of that did you do? And it's putting the fundraiser, as Abby just said, into a transactional mindset instead of relationship-focused. And in mid-level relationship managed caseloads, major gift relationship managed caseloads, planned giving, relationship managed caseloads. You notice I said relationship 3 times now, 4. It's a whole different ballgame. It's just not the same. We're not trying to push everyone through a process and hope it all works out. So just wanted to make sure we call that. That's some of the things that are happening in metrics. I think we can probably advance here. Yeah, one more even. I'm looking for that magic number on the bottom. One more slide. Thanks. So one of the things that we see from where we sit and where we talk about metrics is, if you look on the left, the parts in the top box is black and the type is reversed out. These are old things. Now, total dollars raised, we agree. At the end of the day, you're a fundraiser, and that is what you're doing, raising funds so that your mission can go forward, right? But the old number of face-to-face visits, when I was in a university environment, 15 face-to-face visits every month. Yeah, well, that didn't always work out. The number of asks, the number of gifts closed, the number of stewardship calls, number of prospects identified. You see all this, number of cold calls made. You're a major gift officer. I don't know why you're making cold calls. If you flip it over to the column where it's Veritas, we're looking for meaningful metrics, right? So you have a different list here. There's some overlap, but you notice that we're talking about total dollars raised, meaningful connections, stewardship calls. So you're connecting with donors on impact, telling them what they're done. We do want to pay attention to the fact that you are asking. If you don't ask, that's not a good plan. But look at this next one, working the plan for each donor on your caseload and knowing, this is what Abby referred to when you're talking about the front end, what's happening year over year. Very, very important metrics. So let's go ahead on and we can dig even more into this. So when we're talking about overall revenue, you have this, if you're a major gift officer and you have 150 donors that you've qualified, meaning you've reached two-way engagement, what's the sum total of those 150 donors this year, last year? And it's helpful to look 2 more years back. So it's helpful to have a 4-year window because you want to see the progression. Now that's the big picture. I talk about that as the forest, but you also see that middle circle. You want to look at how each donor performed year over year. You want to see the trees in the forest. And it's really critical to have both views all the time. And then, as I said before, we're looking at the number of meaningful connections. And that we'll talk a lot more about meaningful connections, but I know that one of the first questions that comes up is, okay, so how many is that? If you have 150 qualified donors, we're hoping you get roughly 35 meaningful connections a month. You multiply that up by 12. I'm going to look at my little cheat sheet. You multiply that up by 12 months. That's 420 per year. Now think about it's 150 donors. So that works out to 2.8 truly meaningful connections per year. Your tier A donor, you might have 4 or 5. You might be working on a $5 million ask. You might have 10 with that person. Tier B, maybe you do 2 or 3. Tier C, 1 or 2. So we have a metric that is designed to help you understand your caseload, the engagement with the donor on your caseload, and the value that you're looking to. So let's go ahead and advance, and we'll talk a little about what we mean by overall revenue. And I said a little bit about this before, but remember, it's the sum of the goal. So the sum of what they gave, then we're talking about the sum of your goals. So again, that forest, add up all the goals. What's that total? But you want to keep an eye on every single donor's goal. It's really no different than that. What's your forest? What do your trees look like? That's what you want to do. So if you go on to the next slide, we're going to talk about evaluating. So what do we evaluate? And if you can take a screenshot of this, this is a helpful summary for you, but you also get this back later. So again, the current fiscal year goal, the sum total, the cumulative goal for each donor. Now we say cumulative goal for each donor because the donor might give 2, 3, 4 times a year. Who knows? So you want to know what's the grand total of your goal for that donor, and keep your eye as you're going through the year. How are you doing against your plan, right? Then you want to look at the current fiscal year to date revenue per donor and the cumulative revenue per donor. So you don't want to just wait. If your fiscal year ends in June, don't start looking at this on June 1. You should be paying attention all year round. Where are you against your plan? You can adjust your plan as long as you know what you're doing. And as we said earlier, your prior fiscal year cumulative revenue per donor. So that's your context, your scope, the prior year revenue for each donor, the same donors. And another thing that's helpful is, what would this caseload have looked like if you weren't doing your work? Which means you need to do some analysis. What's your historic attrition like? Because if you have a historic attrition of 25% or 40% is more of what we see, last year's revenue times 0.60% is what will happen if you're not doing the work you're doing. That's been our experience. And we've analyzed thousands of files from organizations a year. So we see that pretty consistently.
Diana?
Yeah.
I want to point out,
Please.
so a couple of years ago, before we revamped our mid-major program at Phoenix Rescue Mission, we did an analysis of our file, like you're suggesting, to make sure that the right people are on the right caseload. And we didn't have enough staff. We didn't have enough gift officers to take care of the current active donors at whatever you're defining as your mid and major. It's different at every organization. And so we said, okay, well, we're going to hire X headcount to take care of the active mid-level donors that we can. We put those remaining, I think at the time it was 700 or 900 donors in a placeholder or a dummy portfolio. And we tried to do a few stewardship touches with them for the year. At the end of the year, we compared that caseload or portfolio, if that's the term you use, with the mid-level officer caseload, and the retention rate for that kind of placeholder dummy portfolio it hurt my heart to see that those donors were not being retained because they were not being engaged. So you too can experiment like that if you don't have enough staff, because it helps tell the story of why you do need staff to take care of donors.
It absolutely does. I'm actually working with a group now that we set up all the caseloads in the fall, but the hiring has been incremental, but we held those caseloads, and we can even see there, wow, when the people who got started in September, October versus the one who got started in February, March, big difference. And those caseloads were set up with parity. And the stewardship we're talking about is impact reporting. So that really kind of brings us to the next slide on, are you creating meaningful connections, really? And I know this brings up a lot of anxiety. How do you define a meaningful connection? Everyone wants an exact science. Well, there is some exactness to it, but then there is the art and science of anything to do in fundraising. But really at its core, a meaningful connection is not related to you. It's related to the donor. It's what matters to the donor. What does the donor actually value? And are you bringing things to the donor that matters to that person such that they're engaging with you? So it might be where the donor takes an action. You've asked, it could be something as simple as you sent an email out with some content, and there was a poll question, something that actually engaged the donor to write back to you, and they did. And now you're in a dialogue. So your email going out wasn't meaningful. Your response coming in, change it to meaningful. So it's what does the donor see meaningful? You might have sent something exactly the same or very similar to 25 people, and 3 or 4 people responded back. That's okay. That is actually okay. Now you know what those 3 or 4 people care about. So it really, again, it takes on, is there an action from the donor? Does it reveal deeper interest from the donor? Do you learn information about the donor that helps you move forward? You didn't know that they had a family foundation. You didn't know that their family made decisions together at Thanksgiving every year. Those kinds of things, that's a meaningful connection. You might call it a purposeful conversation. Well, that's a little tricky because that definition conversation makes you think I have to speak with them. And really, we want to make sure we want to make sure we're including email exchange, text exchange, phone conversations, everything you can think of. Truthfully, you will know when something is meaningful with a donor. So if you're in doubt, it probably isn't. Although I will put this caveat, mid-level officers out there, you tend to be overly harsh in your judgment. So I want to tell you guys maybe to loosen up a tad, because I experience that all the time. It does not have to be face-to-face, but it can be face-to-face. There are plenty of face-to-face that are not meaningful. I was in a university environment. I could go to a reunion and talk to 35 people in 1 hour. That wasn't meaningful, but I might have had several sidebar conversations lasting 15, 20 minutes that were meaningful. So you do have to pay attention to that. So, just being at an event doesn't make it. I think you get my point. And we do want to track them, and we'll talk more about tracking. But Abby, I know you've got a lot to share on this topic yourself.
Meaningful connections. You did a great job. We partner with Veritas, full disclosure, we're coming up on 2 years. And so, but we're really bought into the structure and the strategy that is relationship driven. And that's at the heart of who we are as an organization, as a leadership team, as a board. I don't want to, we are very fortunate and blessed in the environment we're in. And I know there are fundraisers and leaders out there that don't have that. And so I would just encourage you to keep showing, what you've heard in the industry, and take back meaningful connections and say, hey, I think this is going to help us track relationships. And I think just to share a couple of other examples of things that previous folks I've worked with have said, well, I mailed them a birthday card. Well, that's a nice thing to do. You should not do it, but it doesn't allow for that, not even just two-way connection, but that deepening of relationship, learning about their passions and interests, their family, how they want to make a difference in the world. That's kind of the outcome that you're looking for with a meaningful connection. So I don't know if there's anything else you'd like me to add to that, Diana, or
No,
just
I think
affirming what you said.
Yeah, I just appreciate you're in the real world in an organization, so it's helpful to hear the things you're experiencing. If we can go on, because one of the things I want to talk about is working the plan. And this is a key performance indicator, or KPI, is not as quantitative, but it's something you and your supervisor or manager should be in regular communication about. And step number one is you actually create a plan. There's some examples here, and you can screenshot this, but you get the sense of, it's two different major gift scenarios, two different giving levels, different ask periods, but it gives you a sense of what you can do in the progression toward a year. Bottom line, when do you think the ask belongs? Do things that build toward the ask. So cultivation steps, making it a move toward the ask. It might be the kind of information so that essentially when you get to the ask, it's almost like, duh, Diana, you've done a great job preparing me. And the following, you always want to be reporting back. And then there's other things you can do that's particularly purposeful, personal to someone. So again, it's a KPI that's a little harder to measure, because we're not looking for a stroke count of number of things you did. What we want is, did you create a plan that's as custom to a donor as you can, and are you actually executing your plan? So if you have a split role, this can be particularly difficult. If you might do mid-level and major gift together, you might be major gift and plan giving, you might be major gift, but that's 50% of your time and you're doing some other stuff. If that's the situation you're in, we want to make sure you have the right number of donors relative to the amount of time you have. And what we recommend is find a way to help you stay true to your plan. And if you have to block time, go ahead and do that. If things are getting in the way, talk to your supervisor. You're the only one who's really going to know, and you have to speak openly and honestly and positively. I know this goal is important, the revenue for the mission. I'm feeling I'm off track. I appreciate your help to help me be focused on this part of my job, because I know how important it is to the organization. So be proactive about it. Abby, I know you've implemented the Verus Way. Any things that you have to say about like this whole creating a plan and executing it?
Yeah, so the slide that's showing right now is for major gift officers, which is what we do. It's monthly touch points for your entire fiscal year, whatever month you start on. And then if a donor says, yeah, I love you, I love talking to you, I'm going to keep supporting your mission, maybe you pull out and you don't connect with them every month. It's going to be based on what you know about them, what they're looking for in their relationship with your organization, and just kind of reaffirming the way we do it, which is what Veritas recommends, is really looking at if you're a major gift officer, where does your major gift donor give? Do they give one big gift throughout the year? Do they give a few gifts throughout the year? And work that and put that into your plan first. This donor gives $20,000 every April. Well, I need to decide how am I going to report back impact? How am I going to connect with them to say, hey, when would be a good opportunity for us to talk about your giving this year and how you might like to make a difference? And so build that backwards. April, okay, what do I need to do in March and February, January, even going back? So mid-level, our structure and our DEP is a little different. We do every 45 to 60 day touch points. And so your plan may be based on your tiers. So all of your mid A's, mid B's, mid C's, And so our entire mid-level team has that communications plan that they have together. And then they use what they know about the donor to personalize and customize those touch points.
Yep. Thanks, Abby. That's really helpful. I know it's been percolating in the chat box. If you could put the questions in the Q&A, that's a little easier because then Karen can come back around. But I will address what's the size that we're talking about just before I jump into caseload activity. At major gifts, if you're 100% major gifts, what we'd like to see you get to is 150 qualified donors. We know that 1 in 3, generally speaking, will say yes to engagement. So you really need to start with 450 donors, and through time, you get to the 1/3 that say yes. On the mid-level side, you're not looking. You are wanting to qualify. You want to get to engagement with people, but that's not a keep in or keep out thing necessarily. But that size of caseload can be anywhere from 500 to 700, and that's relative to the sophistication in your CRM. How much can you call out of it? Can you email out of it? How easy is it to capture your actions back into it? Do you blind CC your email so it automatically goes into your Salesforce action? So that's the size you're talking about there on mid-level, if that helps you. But in terms of caseload activity, what's included? So you have your pool size. Again, that's the people that you have not yet reached two-way engagement with, and you want to move there. And again, this might be a good one to screenshot. That's a helpful summary list, but you'll get this back again later. There are a lot of measurements available in the Veritas Donor Engagement Plan. We call it the DEP. Some people call it the DEP. There is a complementary version of that you can use that you can get through us. But the point is, it's helping you to restate what's your forest, what's the sum total, and what are your trees? How healthy is the engagement plan and the giving of the individual donors, and being aware of both all the time. So if your CRM doesn't allow you to pivot back and forth, the Veritas Donor Engagement Plan could help you with that. So let's go ahead on and start talking a little bit about transformational donors. While that's not really a metric per se, it's something that we want you to be thinking about. Now, maybe not if you're a brand new major gift officer walking into an organization, or you're forming a brand new caseload, this isn't going to be a year one thing. But we do want you to be thinking long term and identify 4, 5, maybe 6 donors that there might be potential, maybe not this year, but next year, not 15 years from now, but in the relative near future, that you could bring a large ask or a project for that donor to consider. And so that's something you want to be thinking about as you go over time, is if it's a 24 to 36 month strategic plan for that donor. Now, that doesn't mean you don't ask for current giving en route. It's just something that we want you to think about. So that's transformational giving and how that fits in there, because I know from a leadership standpoint, that's really important. Abby, I know I didn't ask you ahead of time, but if that's something you want to speak to on transformational giving.
Yes, it's not something that's, unless it falls from the sky, going to happen the first year you're in relationship with a donor. And even a major donor that you know about, there are donors below your major level that once they start to feel valued and appreciated and see the difference that their dollars are making, they may be that transformational donor in a year, 2, 3 from now. And so really knowing it's okay. And actually it's, if you do try to force a transformational gift, that's transactional. And nobody wants to be twisting or pushing a donor, because giving should be joyful. You should feel excited and want to celebrate with the donor. They should feel the same from you and your organization. And so I do think it's important, though, to identify donors who you've been working with, who you understand their passions and interests, what they're looking for in terms of their investment in your organization, and planning ahead and saying, I know that they have the interest and capacity, and I know what they love. And so I might put an aspirational goal out there that's appropriate and realistic for what you know about them. I wouldn't say, I'm going to go ask that donor for $1.5 million and the donor has no idea it's coming, and they're shocked in the moment. And so I would say plan, not just for the ask, but what you need to do before that ask.
Yep,
Like, what do you
that's the
need to find
strategy
out about them?
piece.
Do you need to introduce them to other people at your organization? The program director, your CEO or president, maybe another leader at the organization to help enhance their relationship and for them to learn and become more educated in the program area that they are interested in.
Yep.
Because you may find you make that introduction and a donor says, okay, well, what do you need? Like, we're ready.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, something awesome. I'm going to use
It
a
does.
layperson term. Something awesome and incredible may happen, and you
It
may
does.
be surprised.
So in terms of the metric conversation, why did I bring
Mhm.
it up? It's not a hard metric, but it's something you as a fundraiser want to be thinking about and you want to review with your supervisor because it's about the total picture of what you're doing and helping to do for your donors to realize joy through making a transformational gift and your organization to move forward. So we can go ahead on and start talking about why this way of evaluation is important. And we've got a couple slides here that I'll walk you through. The next one is on the value. So giving this way helps you to stay on top of the donor each month, so there are no year-end surprises. It can have a significant impact on the donor value attrition because you are more aware of the individual donors. So, for example, I have a lot of people I'm working with that when they ended December, their fiscal year ends March 31. So they had 3 months left. So it was very important that we were clear what's truly in the rearview mirror. Okay, that was my plan. That's not working out. The donor has said so. And what still needs to be in your windshield? So you thought that would happen in October, it didn't, but now you have a conversation with the donor and it could happen in February or March. So that's why it matters. You're constantly thinking what's rearview mirror, what's windshield, what can move based on conversations. So that's the one way to look at it. The next slide talks a little bit different about value attrition. And what we want you to understand here is that at the end of the day, we want you to know the story of every donor. And you can see here that, and I have to move something out of the way so I can see this really well. What you're seeing is on these down the side, 1 through 11, and you look horizontally. Donors don't do the same thing every single year. Sometimes they're down, sometimes they're missing, sometimes they come back up. We want you to understand this because this is going to help you as it goes to attrition. So you know where you might need to be paying attention. Sometimes, and I know this is true because I see it all the time, the donor did give, but it was through a donor advised fund, and it has not yet been soft credited back to your donor's account. It's sitting in the Charles Schwab account. So you will miss that if you're not staying on top of this. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And it's similar kind of concept, but what you can see here is year one, if you look at the bottom, it's 1.9 million. These same donors, year two, 776,000, so a loss of 59%. Year three, these same donors, 5,884. This happens when you're not really paying attention to the donors and you're not reporting back on impact or you don't know the story. And that's what you're trying to avoid. It is not unusual, even in a major gift file, to see attrition of 40%. So that's not a shocking number well, it's shocking. I hate to see it, but it's not unusual. Maybe I should say it that way. So let's talk about what you can do about this. And then we're coming back to meaningful connections, because if you think of that as a metric, remember I said if you're a major gift officer, well, really mid-level too, 35 a month is a good target. You might have a month where it's 30, you might have a month where it's 40, you might have a month where it's 20. So we're looking at the overall. We can go ahead and talk about why this matters. If you think about this, imagery is actually very helpful. If you can get this in your head. Again, I have to move something out of my way there. Your organization is actually a bridge between what a donor cares about, how they're uniquely wired, the things that for whatever reason resonate in them, and significant need in the world, whether it's serving people through social services, whether it's animal welfare, whether it's nature and cleanup and whatnot. And you're the gift officer helping to bring those things together so that a donor realizes joy and an organization can go forward and do the work. That's why this stuff matters. That's why we want to keep calling this out into your attention. So I hope that helps you as you think through that. And give me a second. I just lost my Zoom. page. Okay. All right, I got it back. It went away, it came back. So in order to create meaningful connections, you have to have engaged with the donor and they be qualified. And by qualified, again, we mean they've agreed to two-way engagement. You must know or be seeking to know what the donor cares about. We use the language passions and interests. That might sound strong, but particularly at your highest giving levels, that is absolutely true. And you want to know the donor's communication preferences. And we'll keep talking about this again so we can move forward. But what we want you to understand is if you're in regular touch and you're reaching out from time to time by phone or whatever you use, and you're periodically just asking them, hey, last year when we connected, it was primarily through email. Are you open to using text? Is that helpful to you? I know in the past you really preferred phone conversations. Are you open to a Zoom conversation? So the basic principle here is just ask. That's what we want you to get a sense of.
So I'm just jumping on to say we have so many great questions, and I know we have a lot more great slides. So I usually have to tell Diana to slow down, but now I'm having to tell you all to speed up a little bit.
That's not normal for me. Yeah.
You're doing great though.
You're going to love the next. Let's go to the next slide. And so this is just some example language. Maybe just screenshot this and we can go on to the next one. 28. Okay. This is sort of restating some things, but again, to gauge if it's meaningful is really, was it meaningful to the donor? It can be a pre-planned thing that went out, but it's not meaningful until the donor responds to it. So that's, again, these are 4 ways you can gauge that. Let's go ahead on to the next slide. And again, this is a great screenshot because these are ways you can make meaningful connections. Just speaking like maybe to one of them, doing a FaceTime tour of a program. I have seen that done successfully in a case where a donor couldn't be present and the gift officer used FaceTime to do the tour. You have to be really careful. You don't want to make them seasick while you're doing it. And I know of a situation where a donor was with a gift officer at lunch. A colleague was doing an in-service day. They quickly FaceTime and the donor could see what was going on there. The point is to be creative and find ways that really make a connection. So we can go. Abby, I know you probably have more
I'm just going to say,
yeah.
And it doesn't have to be just with you. You're not the only keeper of that relationship. They're not, you've probably heard, that's my donor. Well, it's your organization's donor. And actually, you're probably their nonprofit. You're probably one of many. And so I was just going to say, it may be you're asking someone else to send or communicate with the donor, call and thank them, send them a thank you video. Our COO is essentially the relationship manager with one of our highest individual donors. The donor paid for a restricted gift for a project. I said to my colleague, our COO, I said, you need to text that photo to the donor because that thing just got installed. And the donor responded, right? And so it's okay. You're managing a relationship with the donor, but you're also managing anyone else that may have relationship with the donor.
Yeah. And let's pull this together and we can go ahead to where we're talking about, you can go ahead actually to the next slide there, because what we really want to do is how do we track this? So go ahead and next. There's ideally you want this tracked in your CRM, your database. You want to review how you're tracking, what a major gift or a mid-level officer does on their performance. And you need to think about who needs to be involved in that conversation to set that up. So you can actually go ahead again. What you might be able to do is if your system has action type codes, like email, and maybe you can have a subcode of MC-email, meaning contextual email, phone, or maybe an MC phone, or maybe it's a sub category. The overarching point is we're bringing this up because we are telling you very clearly, and beating this horse dead, meaningful interactions is a huge metric that Veritas embraces and helps organizations to embrace wholeheartedly. And when we see that metric understood, embraced, and enacted upon, we see relationships with donors truly change and we see revenue change. So this is a very technical part, and it can be overcome in almost every data system. It just means talking to the right people. So that's probably good there.
Can I throw in just,
yeah.
I think you may not know your CRM. You may not be the expert on your on your staff, or I'll say at your organization. And so getting with your IT, your database team, whoever is the expert on staff, and saying, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. This is the outcome I'm looking for. What is the best way for me to input that data so that we can report on it? Let them be the brains helping you achieve your outcome. You can make suggestions. Hey, I think it would be best for me to do this action type or subcode or whatever it might be. But just go share with them, work with them. They're your partners.
Yes.
Hopefully they are, and always thank them, and then show how they made a difference in donor relationships. But really just let them help you accomplish your goals.
Yep. And a real quick example, especially if you're at a supervisor or leadership position, key performance indicators or KPIs are used to help a gift officer move forward and to reach forward. They're not meant to be a sledgehammer. I have a plan giving officer nearing the end of her fiscal year. Her KPI is 15 new legacy expected booked. She's not going to hit that KPI, but guess what? She has 24 active conversations with people who said they're interested. And she might not hit 15 this year, but she may hit 35 by June. Who knows? So it's within a context. So we always want to know the context and and demonstrating that you're doing the work. So that's where the database is your friend. And you can go ahead on to the DEP, again, donor engagement plan. This is a particular worksheet that Veritas has developed. Many of your CRMs do these kinds of things. But what you want you to do is keep track of what you're doing. Not just for the sake of it. Nobody's brain can hold all this stuff. It honors the donor when you do it because you remember things, and it honors your organization because they've invested your time and energy in this. So I know, Abby, you have some things to say about the DEP and how you work together.
Yes, I have no idea, the 200 plus people who are on this webinar, how many of them work with Veritas, have ever taken a webinar, know what a DEP is. For those of you who don't know, this is going to not even do it justice. It's a tricked out Excel sheet, and you're thinking, oh no, I don't want something outside of my CRM. It has got pivot tables and forms, and it is incredible. Now, things still need to be in your CRM. You need to track your action notes or your interactions or whatever your CRM calls, however you communicate and work with your donor. But the DEP is so helpful with planning those touch points, looking at your month goal, your month actual, what's the deepest level of engagement you've had with your donor, what are their communication preferences. And so I would highly recommend, if you don't use a donor engagement plan, to reach out to Veritas. I've had folks on my team who have been fundraising for 15 plus years. They've brought in their old experiences with them, right? And they're using this donor engagement plan and loving it. And so you'd think that there might be resistance to, well, that's just not how I've ever done it before. But once they see that it's a really helpful tool that will make their life easier and help them track their successes so that they can share with you, if you're a supervisor, it's a really great system, and I would encourage everyone to look into it. And look, I see a lot of people saying yes. And actually, someone who just commented is on my team. So she's verifying she's a major gift officer. So.
That's great. So let's start talking about, staying true to the relationship, focused metrics. That's not easy to say. Okay. So let's talk about the next slide is managing to objectives. You want to know what is it you're actually trying to accomplish. Don't manage to a checklist of stuff. Manage to the objective of what you're trying to accomplish. Increase revenue so that your organization can go forward and donors are engaged in that and experience joy. So focus on setting objectives that you and your team members can agree on achieving. And remember, it's not about managing time. It's about accomplishing that which you're actually there to do versus check marks or stroke counts.
I want to quickly speak to this for gift officers who feel like they don't have or can't have or shouldn't have a voice in what their metrics and objectives are. And we have our annual plans for our portfolios, our comms plan, our, how many meaningful connections, but we actually you can do the most traditional is quarters. We actually do ours in thirds. So it's 4 It's 4 months a year, and we sit down, the mid-level team sits down, the major gifts team sits down, our church and corporate team sits down, and we look at, hey, what are our stretch goals going to be when it comes to meaningful connections, when it comes to identifying passions and interests and preferences, because we have goals for our thirds or quarters on that, and it may be season out related to the season. Summer, people leave. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. People get out of Dodge, and so you may have less interactions, meaningful connections with donors. So you may, as a team and as a leader, say, you know what, I think our goals for this time of year are expected to be lower. I don't want my team to break their necks because of things that are outside of their control. So it's definitely a team conversation and letting people have a voice. No, it may not be a democracy, but it is,
Right.
it is, it's everybody being able to speak and give feedback on
Yep.
what is realistic and what are they experiencing. They're out there
Mhm.
every day.
Yep.
So
Perfect. Thanks, Abby.
team
That's-
conversation. Mhm.
Yeah, that really makes it difference. So again, we're talking here about actively coaching your team on the right things. So we can go on and talk a little bit about cultural accountability here.
Mhm.
Sorry, once again, Zoom is kind of playing some tricks on me. We can go ahead to the next slide, 38. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. Sorry. So this is what we're looking for: accountability, work the plan and connecting. Are you as a fundraising spending time with the right donors? It doesn't really help if you have 15 lunches with 3 people and nobody else hears from you. Gather metrics on a regular basis, reporting from each employee. Include the employee in that gathering. It does not really help if stuff comes winging out of the CRM and it's not in relationship to the fundraiser to vet it, because sometimes queries are wrong or whatever. And if significant adjustments to the goal need to be made, you have to communicate that up to leadership. As soon as you know, I had a fundraiser who expected $1 million gift from a donor. As soon as the donor said it will not be this year, that got reported up and it's moved to the next fiscal year. You can't control what the donor does. You can control your transparency with your leadership team, so your leadership team can make good decisions. So that's what went there about accurate reporting. Accountability. We can go on to the next. And then what we want to make sure is that your reporting is accurate to the best of your knowledge. This is where you want to talk with your database manager, make sure they understand the categories in which you work. So you want to get the reporting information from all fundraisers. You want to identify trends with giving, touch points, meaningful connections, so you know right direction, wrong direction, so you can make course corrections as you're going. You want to report upline to your CEO, executive director, or the board, whatever it is. And you want to, again, as we've said before, provide updates to any major changes in goals. This is critical. If you don't do this, if you hold this inside yourself, first of all, you're going to be sweating bullets, but the organization cannot make good decisions. And you are responsible for that part. So one last thing, and then we get to questions. I'm going fast, Karen. All right. We want to make sure you have good expectations that it fits to the role that you're in. So if you're looking at a major gift program over the length of time of this caseload, if it's new, you'll have a ratio of 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, meaning what you spend X, I'll make it up. You spend $100, you'll get $200 or $300 back. When you get to the middle, a little more mature, you spend $100, you get $300, you spend $100, you get $800. And then as it gets more mature, 1 to 6 or 1 to 10. And we have seen people have exponentially higher mature portfolios, somebody who's stuck with the organization a long time, and deep relationships. So if you're a leader looking at this is a good one to screenshot, because this proportionality matters. It matters to your expectations. It helps a fundraiser have a right view. So I think we can do questions, Karen. Phew.
Okay. That was great. Wonderful. Wonderful. Is there anything to finish out the end, and then we'll just go to questions? That might be better. Anything else you all want to share after questions, or are we good to go with questions?
I'm excited about all the questions I'm
I
seeing.
know.
So let's
Great.
See them.
Okay, good. So here we go. For you, Abby. I work in higher ed as a major gift officer. My goal is to raise $2 million. 60% of my portfolio is cold. and we don't have a middle donor program. What are your suggestions of meaningful touch points to do discovery work other than trying to secure a phone call, Zoom call, or meeting? And after how many tries do I disqualify them?
Wow. My heart sank. I was like, no mid-level program. I've been a gift officer in higher ed, so I can understand where what your experience is. And I just wanted to pull up what the written question was. I saw it and it just disappeared. I think you might have answered it. So the question was examples of meaningful connections.
Yeah. How do
Or
I go
suggestions for
about the
meaningful
meaningful
discovery work.
connections? How many
Yeah.
touch points do I do? How long do I try? Yeah.
Yeah. And so if it sounds like a majority of your caseload or portfolio is cold, so they probably, I'm interpreting that to mean they've never heard from someone, or you're just not able to reach them. And so I would suggest, you have your two groups of your portfolio or caseload, those you've connected with and those you haven't. And those that you haven't, I would set up and execute an introductory series. And Veritas has white papers and webinars on how to do this, but it's really sending an intro letter to the donor. Hey, this is who I am. I'm your point of contact. I really just would love the opportunity to connect with you, to understand, what inspires you or motivates you to partner with our organization. I'd love to send you stories of impact from time to time, really making it personal on why you are reaching out to them and offer them value, and kind of put them at ease of, I'm not reaching out to you to solicit you right now. And so introduce yourself, follow up on that letter. If you have phone number, email, I would try, depending on the donor, 2 to 3 attempts, and then start sending them or communicating with them on a regular basis, whatever that looks like for your organization. And let me just say, one of my gift officers who's been reaching out to this donor for 2 years, called him in December. He answered the phone and said, Christy, it's so great to hear from you. And she was shocked because this donor acted as if they were friends and they had met. And he just had been hearing from her for 2 years. And so it's be persistent, but also make sure that you're reaching out. Don't give up, because you don't know when someone is ready to respond. Because donors are people too, right? Just think about your life. You get phone calls and emails and texts and letters, and you're like, oh yeah, later, I'll respond to that later. So, I would say as your discovery work, letter, call, email, variety, especially until you know what the donor prefers.
Yes, go on our website and to the white paper section. We have all these free white papers, and the one on qualifying will really help you with that. Thank you, Abby. So Diana, as a major gift officer in an organization that's beginning to crack down on traditional metrics, how can I best advocate for them to stick with more relational approach? Like all the folks on here are like, yes, it's been like this, it's horrible. What can they do about it?
Well, if you like what Abby expressed, where they actually had an empty caseload, unmanaged caseload, it was crystal clear. Like it was very clear that the metric of meaningful connection and being engaged resulted in greater revenue, and just being there, even with occasional touches, did not. I realize you're probably not in that position to do that. Boy, I wish I had an easy button answer for you. The truth is,
can I throw a bone and really just, Veritas will do a free file assessment for you, I think, right? And so, yes. I would encourage it, if you can get permission and say, hey, let's have this expert in the industry assess our file of donors. What do we have? Who do we have? At what levels? And then say, we've got enough for all these portfolios. That might get people looking and talking in the right direction of how to really take care of the donors who support your organization.
Yeah, once they get that forest and trees analogy, it's really starts making sense.
Great, thank you. I popped a link to that assessment in the chat box. Thanks, Abby.
Okay.
Abby, is it common for leadership to set unrealistic goals and expect that if half is met, they consider it a win? Talk about like what you're seeing out there with goal setting. What are you seeing happening, and how do we help people with some of this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess every organization would identify or define success differently. I would say, what are the goals that you're getting halfway to, right? Is it dollars? Is it meaningful connections? Um, because if it's dollars, there's a lot of reasons why maybe you met or didn't meet a goal. And so really getting into looking at that value of the donors that are on your caseload or portfolio, to see, hey, you met X percentage of your goal. Was it from one donor who just sold their business and gave you a $200,000 check, which did happen to us a few years ago? And so I would imagine a lot of fundraisers that we want to be good at our jobs, we want to be successful, and so if your leadership is celebrating a win like that, that's good. But I also think you can take control over how successful you are to some degree. And
Yeah, so Diana, just to add to
yeah.
that, how do we set goals with folks? Just so everyone knows what that
Yeah.
looks like. Thank you,
So,
Abby.
yeah, if I'm working with a fundraiser, I'm in the midst of it with a number of people right now. We actually go to their caseload and we go line by line with the donor. We look at what the giving history has been. We talk through what's the story of this year. We talk about what opportunities there are in the next year that they might want to invest in. And we create what we call a management goal and an aspirational reach goal. Like, where might you go? Not every donor has an aspirational goal. And we put a dollar amount in there, and then I push against that. I'm like, I want to make sure that's an achievable thing. So tell me the story behind that. Or I might say, I think they gave more 2 years ago. Let's think about that. Is it possible for your goals to help the donor invest like they did 2 years ago? So we do that line by line. Actually, I usually start high to low and work my way down. At the highest level donors, there's a deeper conversation. And then at donors who are giving less, not as deep of a conversation, but say somebody's been giving 10,000 a year for the last 5 years. I'd say, I think one of your goals this year is to ask them if they're open to a conversation about increasing their support because of XYZ. You do need to be able to talk about XYZ. That's the donor wants to accomplish something. And so you need to help them understand what impact they can have that's different next year than this year. I hope I helped you there, Karen. Did I answer it the way you were thinking?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
That's great. That's great. Just final question, Abby, just to kind of circle back. We got one person here saying that their leadership's looking at pushing the case recommendation for 120 meetings. Just remind us again of how you track meaningful connections and what they mean. I think that's a nice way to wrap us up.
Yeah, and CASE is an organization related to higher ed, just for those who don't know. And so meetings, they can be meaningful. And I would share with them what you learned today and really get at, like, why do we do what we do? And how do we want our donors to feel? I'm going to say that we as an organization, a few of us leaders a few weeks ago got together, and we wanted to answer, we wanted to create a donor outcome. Like, if somebody came to you, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, Manju. If someone came to you today and said, hey, I hear that your organization stewards donors, you're the cream of the crop on how you take care of your donors. Tell me about that. We said, how would we want to answer that question? And we looked at our organizational values, and we used that to create a donor objective or outcome that was very conversational, very simple. And really we want our donors to know that they are cared for, and that we know them, so that we can personalize all of our communication and interaction with them so that they feel like they're a part of our organization. And so if that's an outcome that you want, what's the best way to get there? How do you want your donors to feel cared for, that they trust you, and that they're a part of your organization? And it may not be counting meetings. So I would say, what are you valuing at the end of the day as your organization? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And I think I hope that helps you. And I can drop my email in the chat for anyone who wants to follow up on anything. I saw some Razor's Edge questions. We do use that. So
Yes, that's very
I hope that
kind of you,
answered. Yep.
Abby. Thank you. Before we wrap up, I know we're already a minute over. Diana, any final words? That was great, Abby.
Just create a plan and execute it, and keep connecting with your donors. That's at the end of the day the most important thing.
Well, this was a great presentation. I saw people saying this should have been longer because there was so much good content. That was really great. So thank you for being with us today and for sharing your great questions. As a reminder, you'll receive a recording of this webinar and a copy of the slide deck later by tomorrow morning. If you're interested in learning more about how you can get support to stay focused on meaningful connections, we'd love to help. You can reach out to us at hello@veritasgroup.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and take care.